Welcome. Today we are going to be reviewing the Atlona Omni 311 and Atlona Omni 324 profiles and their installation and use.
To start off, what you're going to need to do is import any profiles that you downloaded off the website into your Savant profile database. To do this, go into your RacePoint Blueprint software, click on the RacePoint Blueprint menu, go ahead and click on Preferences, select a folder to import your new profiles into, click Import. Navigate to the folder that you've downloaded and select the profiles that you wish to import and go ahead and click Import. Repeat this step for any other profiles that you want to import. Once you're done, go ahead and close this window and you can start utilizing the profiles you've imported.
Once our profiles are imported into our Savant database, we're going to go ahead and place them in our config. Now, in this scenario, I'm just going to have an example of one computer here and two monitors. So I'll have the USB connected to this computer, and then I'll have keyboard and mouse connected at each of these monitor locations. So let's go ahead and search for our devices. So the 311 will go at the computer end. And I'll name that computer USB so that I know that that's at the computer. And then we have the 324, and we'll call this room 1 keyboard. And we'll place another one, call this room 2 keyboard. Now, once these are all placed, we are going to make the network connection. Now you'll see there's no USB connections on these because Savant is not going to recognize USB and nor handle any USB routing. So let's go ahead and make these Ethernet connections. And when you make the connections, you're going to need to enter in the IP address for each of these devices. So the computer is at the computer, the Omni 311 is at the 127 address, and the keyboard 1 is at the 129 address, and keyboard 2 is at 130. So now we've placed each of the components, both the transmitters and the receivers, and we've made their Ethernet connections. Now, the way these work is Savant needs to send these receivers commands to say, hey, this is a possible transmitter that you're going to connect to. And it's going to send that to both of those transmitters. And that's pretty much it. It's an initial setup of these transmitters, and that's it. So we need to at least tell Savant what the transmitters are that we are going to connect to. So we're going to go ahead and open up Inspector on keyboard 1, and we're going to go to State Variables. And in here we have a list, USB host 1, 2, 3. So this is set up to connect up to 10 different computers. So if you had more than one computer, you would add the MAC address in there for each of the computers. So I've already added in the MAC address for this computer, but you would have to click on this initial value and type that in that matches the MAC address. Notice there's no colons in there. You're just going to type the MAC address with just the letters and numbers. You're going to do the same thing for the room 2 keyboard. So I've selected room 2, and as you can see, I need to enter this in. So 00. So now I've entered that in for both of those devices. So now when this system powers up, it's going to send a command to this receiver and say, hey, this is a transmitter that you could be talking to. And then it's going to send the same command to this saying this is a receiver. If you had more, it's going to say these are the receivers, and it would send multiple commands. Now, similarly to that, we need to set up in the computer side in Inspector the receivers that it could talk to. So we'll go ahead and put the MAC addresses in here. So there's the MAC address for one, and there's the MAC address for the other. So this computer isn't necessarily going to get any commands right off the bat, but it's going to know that it can talk to this or it can talk to this. Now, you're going to want to remember which USB receiver is number 1, which USB receiver is number 2. Now, this one's easy because I have room 1, that matches up with 1, and room 2 matches up with room 2. So now that we've set that all up, we've set up our communication to the endpoints, and what we're going to need to do is build a workflow to actually send the switching commands. So Savant's automatically building the video switching commands, but it's not automatically building the USB switching commands. So we're going to go ahead and generate services. And then under room 1, under general programmable services, we're going to say room 1 keyboard active. And then we're going to go ahead and double click on this workflow. And we're going to search for our computer. So here's our computer USB. We're going to drag this in. We're going to select the device under function, resources custom, and we're going to select USB receiver. Now remember, we're in room 1, so this USB receiver number we're going to select is number 1. So we're going to go ahead and save this and close it. And now we can go to room number 2. And again, under General Programmable Services, we're going to create the same thing. Keyboard to select active. We're going to drag this in. I'm just repeating the same thing I did for keyboard 1, but now I'm selecting for keyboard 2. I save this and I close it. Now, we're also going to need to make sure that when the monitor is not actively connected to the computer, we're going to want to disconnect the USB connection so that we don't accidentally have the mouse and keyboard connected to the computer when we don't want to, or whatever the interface it may be. So I'm just going to go back to room 1. You can do this in any room. You only need to do this once. And we're going to create another workflow. And we're going to say computer keyboard inactive. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up our computer workflow. I'm sorry, our computer request. and you're going to see this unpair all command. And what this does is this tells it to disconnect from any other keyboards and mice. Nothing is connected to it. So that's going to prevent you from accidentally sending commands to a computer that you're not actually viewing the monitor on. So now that we've built the workflows, we need to go ahead and create the triggers. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to open up our trigger engine here. And I'm going to create a couple triggers. The first trigger is going to be keyboard select room 1. The next one is keyboard select room 2. Keyboard disabled. So keyboard select room 1. So what we're going to want to do is open up our SRS window. And we're going to want to go to this video source, the computer video source, and we're going to say when this service is active, so room 1, HDMI video source on the computer, when this service is active, when that's true, then we're going to want to send the service requests. We got to go to room 1, general programmable services, because this is where we created our workflow. And I want to say room 1 keyboard active. So this is going to send the command when this service is active, when room 1 is viewing the computer monitor, then it's going to send the command to make this zone active for this receiver active for the USB. We're going to do the same thing for room 2. Room 2, service is active, that's true. And the request is make the keyboard active. So now we've got when room 1 is active, it's going to make keyboard 1 active. When room 2 is active, it's going to make keyboard 2 active. Then we need to make the keyboard disabled. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go to the component. We're going to go to the computer. I'm sorry, we're going to go to the service. And we're going to make sure this service, so if this service is not active, so room 1 service is not active, and then I'm going to go to room 2, this service is not active, and we want to make sure that this, when any of these states change, right now it's only looking at room 1, we want it to look at room 2 as well. So we're going to grab room 2 services active and grab that up there. So now that we have room 1 services active, room 2 services active. So now it's looking at both. And when both are false, because it says match all, when both are false, we're going to send that request that we made that says computer keyboard inactive. So now, because neither one of these services is active, this is going to set it up to disconnect the keyboards. That is all we need to do to create our custom workflows and our triggers to operate these keyboard and mouse for this computer. Now, if you have more computers or more monitors, you would have to build more workflows to make that happen. But this is just a basic start to get you the understanding that you need to utilize this profile. Now, the profiles do have notes in them that just remind you of a few of the things I mentioned, making sure that you're placing a 324 profile for each 324 that's installed, and make sure the IP address is on the wire. You also need to enter the MAC address in for all of the host units. And likewise, the 311 has similar notes saying be sure that you have a 324 profile a 311 profile installed for each of the 311s, and make sure that you're putting all the MAC addresses in. And here's the big note of make sure to send an unpair command to the host to make sure that you disconnect any keyboards that are not in use. Hopefully that was helpful for you and you got a full understanding of the use of the Omni 311 and Omni 324 profiles. If you have any questions, please reach out to support. Thank you.